Today, we're going over 10 of the best weapons to use on a controller input. Not only are these weapons some of the most lethal options to use, but they're often viewed as the best feeling weapons, which is a huge contributing factor to how much a weapon gets used by the player. For example, Crimson is a weapon that feels really good when using a controller. The combination of high range, stability, and aim assist stats is what makes this weapon feel like a really good weapon. Another contributing factor to Crimson, and for a few other weapons on this list, is the new capability of turning on full auto for all of your weapons. Since its inception, Crimson has been a 3-burst pulse rifle-like hand cannon that requires you to pull the trigger each time you want to shoot the weapon. With this new full auto setting change, Crimson became that much more potent in PvP. There are two things that I want you to try to make sure you try out if you decide you want to give this weapon a go for a while. The first is if you play on a maximum FOV, which is 105, I want you to lower it to 95. By doing this, you'll actually be able to see the small red dot reticle after each recoil of the gun, allowing you to reset your aim a little bit easier each time you shoot. Secondly, if you are able to, use the ornament Ali Dad. In my opinion, I think it's a little bit of a cleaner weapon model, which also contributes to being able to reset your aim a bit better between each shot. Combine all of these together and you've got one of the best gunplay experiences in the game for a controller input. Another really good example of a strong controller weapon is one that has had its time in the limelight for sure, but it isn't quite the menace that it used to be, and that's the Last Word. Now, don't get me wrong, within its intended range, it's basically unmatched. With a 0.53 second optimal time to kill, it has the second fastest TTK in the entire game. When you're in the short to short mid range, the Last Word will absolutely fry people. The problem is, with the current sandbox, shotguns and SMGs also occupy that range. SMGs will outrange the Last Word easily, and shotguns are a one-hit kill. Both of these are problems for the Last Word, but if you've got complementary loadout and playstyles, the Last Word can do wonders for you. Just for the love of God, please don't ADS with it. Speaking of ADSing, the next weapon in our top 10 is more so a weapon type than a particular weapon, and that's snipers. I cheated the system a bit for this one because honestly, snipers are purely preferential. And what I mean by that is that one sniper could feel really good to one person, but completely atrocious to another. So I just didn't feel it was right to single out one particular sniper just because it works for me. The big reason snipers make the list for this video today has to do with how aim assist and reticle friction work for controllers in Destiny 2. When aiming down sight at a target while using a controller, your reticle will actually stick to the opponent's crit region. This is called reticle friction and is different than aim assist. Aim assist is the in-game mechanic of the bullets actually bending towards the target. And the higher the aim assist stat, which you can now see in the game, the more likely your weapon's bullets will bend towards its target if your aim is off. So with controllers, not only are you getting that aim assist, which MNK players actually get more of, but you're also getting that reticle friction to help compensate for having the lack of dexterity that MNK players have. On the topic of MNK players, one of their preferred weapon types are hand cannons. They're super effective, high damage output weapons that only take 3 crits to kill an opponent. And as a controller player, if you've got the itch to use a hand cannon, then I would suggest using 120 hand cannons. As I'm writing the script for this video, Bungie actually teased the return of a very popular Trials weapon next season, the Igneous Hammer. The Igneous Hammer is a 120 rate of fire hand cannon that is an absolute stat monster. It excels in every single statistical category compared to its other 120 counterparts. And this is pure speculation, but if the perk pools of other previously retired Trials weapons that have returned are any indication, then Igneous Hammer will return with some juiced perks. Kill clip, explosive payload, slide shot, these are all real possibilities and would essentially make any other 120 hand cannon obsolete. And you know what? I'm kind of here for it. Making it super desirable makes the Trials player population saturated again, and the overall PvP experience just gets that much better. Overall, 120s are okay if you're running casual 6s, but a well-coordinated 120 hand cannon team is really strong in 3v3 modes. The BXR 55 Battler is next on our list. The Battler is one of my all-time favorite weapons simply because of its versatility, and I think it's certainly in the conversation for the most player-friendly weapon in the game. It's a craftable weapon with tons of fantastic perk combinations, and is the only weapon in the game with certain perk combinations. It's the only non-sunset weapon in the game that can roll accurized rounds and ricochet rounds. And it also is the only weapon in the game to have the perk blunt execution rounds, which grants a 100% damage boost in PvP if you deal melee damage to someone if they're within 15 meters. And while this only lasts for 10 seconds or until the next burst gets shot, it turns the BXR into a 0.40 second time to kill. In the final column with blunt execution rounds, you've also got Kill Clip, which knocks the TTK down to 0.53 seconds, as well as the newly retooled perk Gut Shot Straight. Another great thing about the Battler is its capability of extremely accurate hipfire shooting, which is a nod to the old Halo battle rifle. This means that you can use the weapon for its intended range, which is mid to long range, as well as short range if you're needing to spray someone down in an emergency. Overall, the Battler is just a super player-friendly weapon with really good stats and is craftable to your specific playstyle. Whether you're new to the game or an experienced player, I highly suggest giving Xur a visit at his treasure hoard to start your journey in obtaining your BXR. If pulse rifles are your thing, but you're looking for something that hits a little bit harder, then I'd go for the Phylotactic Spiral, a 340 RPM high-impact pulse rifle which can be obtained from progressing through the Lightfall campaign. If you own Lightfall and you complete the campaign on 3 different characters, then you'll likely already have 3 red border weapons towards the total of the 5 that you need. You can get the remaining 2 by simply completing gold patrols throughout Neomuna. With the current sandbox, high-impact pulse rifles are basically second to none. They have the capability to 2-burst if you land all your headshots, and the range is so good from basically every single angle on every single map, just simply due to the design of the current maps. The icing on top is that, yes, it's craftable, but it has 2 perks that really make it shine in duels, and that's Keep Away and Head Seeker. Keep Away will give it a free 10 range stat bump, and it narrows the accuracy cone by 5%, which basically means it becomes more accurate and easier to hit headshots. And since you're already using it at the longer ranges, you'll essentially have Keep Away procced during every single engagement. Head Seeker, since its recent rework, is nice because it increases aim assist and precision damage whenever you hit body shots, which is nice because, let's be real, we're not always going to be hitting those headies. Now, if you're someone who's playing more 6v6 than 3v3, you could also substitute Head Seeker with Kill Clip, giving you 25% increased damage after getting a kill and reloading. Overall, the Phylotactic Spiral is a strong option on controllers thanks to it being craftable and playing into the aim assist and reticle friction perks you can apply to it. And remember what I said earlier, a lot of these weapons really thrive if you turn on the full auto setting in your settings. It allows you to solely focus on your aiming and not worry about pulling the trigger down each time you need to shoot. Oh, and if you made it this far, keep watching until the end because I've got a bonus couple of weapons that didn't quite make the top 10 list, but that I think are still pretty viable. Now, let's say you're more of a run and gun type player. Maybe you like to be a bit more aggressive, or maybe you just like to be anti-meta and use double primaries. If that's the case, then using something like Drang would probably be a really solid option for you. Drang is another craftable weapon that has a lot of potential for different playstyles, and there's a couple different avenues you can go down when deciding how to craft it. You can go down the route of chaining kills together by using Rampage or Swashbuckler. The latter, especially if you've got a melee build. Or you could go the route of having it be a solid dueling weapon with perks like Moving Target, Eye of the Storm, and Zen Moment. My preferred way of using Drang is usually with another long-ranged primary such as a pulse rifle, and then using my Drang as a longer ranged shotgun. I use Quick Draw and Zen Moment, which I highly suggest using as a controller player. M&K players may not see as much benefit from Zen Moment since it's just innately easier to control recoil on a mouse, but what Zen Moment does for controller players is reduce the need to control screen shake, reticle bounce, and recoil direction while the perk is active. Quick Draw makes Drang feel like a legitimate sidearm and is honestly quite good when used in the air, allowing you to distance yourself from people that are rushing you with a shotgun. Sidearms aren't for everyone, and it certainly limits your instant one-hit kill potential, but if you've got the patience and the playstyle for it, you can be extremely effective. If you're interested in sidearms and you're feeling like getting a little kinky with it, then maybe try out the Forerunner, an exotic special ammo sidearm. Any stataholic is probably going to end up liking Forerunner because, I mean, just look at this thing. Maxed out range, high reload, high aim assist, and really good stability, which can be further enhanced by taking advantage of its exotic trait, Pace Yourself. Pace Yourself lessens the weapon's recoil and makes it more accurate if you tap the trigger instead of spraying it full auto. The great thing though is that it's very manageable no matter which way you use it. However, there are instances where you will notice doing it one way may be more beneficial than doing it the other way, and vice versa. Before the recent changes to armor mods, using Forerunner and Drang together was actually quite efficient because you could double up on sidearm mods. However, now with mods being weapon element specific, it's a smidge less efficient, but still a really good duo to use. The only thing you really lack is that instant kill potential that I mentioned earlier. Pairing Forerunner with something like an SMG though would be a super lethal option within the current sandbox meta. And if we're looking forward to future seasons with the information we know, I would even suggest 720 auto rifles as a potential pairing. With SMGs being brought in line just a little bit, I could see 720s taking back their intended role within the sandbox. The one thing I do want to mention with Forerunner is that it can 3-tap people that are 9 resilience or lower, which turns out to be a 0.60 time to kill. But if they have 10 resilience, it actually takes 4 shots to kill them, which increases the time to kill up to about 0.9 seconds. And while you may be thinking, it's only one more shot, you're right. But a 0.90 second time to kill is as slow or slower than any primary weapon's time to kill in the whole game, which means you're basically losing every single fight. And with the current meta being very Titan friendly, most Titans are going to be running tier 10 resilience, so you're likely going to experience this quite a bit. Forerunner is still a really nice weapon to use though. Do not sleep on it. Another weapon you don't want to sleep on is the scout rifle from the Guardian Games event, Taraxipos. Unfortunately, as I just mentioned, this weapon is only obtainable from the spring event Guardian Games. But man, does this thing have some potential for all kinds of loadouts and playstyles. At its base, the Taraxipos is a lightweight scout, which means you gain a passive 20 mobility just for having the weapon wielded. Super good. Though it only has 54 recoil direction, it's a scout, which means it's pretty manageable to control on its own. The knock is that it has a base time to kill of 0.90 seconds. However, we do have some ways to alleviate that quite a bit. You can go for something simple like Kill Clip, which will take it from a 4-tap to a 3-tap, 0.6 second time to kill. Or you could go for Cascade Point, which still requires 4 shots to kill, but bumps it all the way down to 0.54 second time to kill. All it requires is either a kill with another weapon or multiple precision hits with another weapon to activate the perk on Taraxipos. The main draw for me with this weapon is its ease of use. It's really easy to control, and if you've got Zen Moment paired with a damage increasing perk, you can essentially turn this thing into the best scout rifle in the game for PvP. Graviton Lance is the last weapon to sneak into the top 10 before we get into our 2 honorable mentions. Graviton has been through some stuff, I'll tell you what. Any OG Destiny 2 players can certainly tell the stories of old where Graviton ruled the weapon sandbox. They can also tell you of its abrupt end for literally years, only to be revived this season, season 21. In PvE, this thing is disgusting. If you're not going to use it in PvP, then for the love of all things, use it in PvE. You won't be sorry. But in PvP, it's a really solid option. It's super manageable thanks to its beefy stats, and if you apply the catalyst, you get 20 extra range into your stat bar. Graviton has the same TTK as a 140 hand cannon, which in Bungie's eyes is considered the most balanced PvP weapon type in the sandbox. Its exotic trait, Cosmology, is mostly a gimmick inside of PvP. There may be a time or two in 6v6 where you may end up getting an extra kill because of the Cosmology explosion, but it's certainly not something you should be relying on, which might beg the question of why use it in the first place. To which I'll simply counter with, because it feels good. Much like every other weapon on this list, Graviton feels super smooth on a controller and can definitely compete with the rest of the sandbox. For our honorable mentions, I won't go into super detail about each of them, but I just felt bad not at least mentioning them as some of the viable choices for your loadouts. Peace of Mind is a rapid fire pulse rifle which can be crafted. It's a solid dueling weapon that has some decent perk combos for most scenarios. Finally, slug shotguns are probably my dark horse pick for controller players. While they do require a bit more calculation in their usage, they can be super lethal in the right hands. You can outrange regular pellet shotguns and be quite aggressive with them as well. Duality is actually the best of both pellet and slug shotguns, as it can do both based on whether you hip fire it or ADS with it. It's one of my top 3 favorite weapons of all time, so give it a try. If you're looking for a Blitz style tip video with no fluff added, I made a video for each specific class going over some tips that you may or may not have known about each of the classes. Just click on one of the videos on your screen now.